The room was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and tension hung thick in the air. Pam Bondi stepped to the podium, poised, polished, ready to control the narrative. But then he stood up, a battle-hardened Marine, his voice cutting through the noise like a gunshot. "Enough talk, Ms. Bondi. My brothers are dying while drowning in your bureaucracy. What are you going to do about it?" The room fell silent. Bondi had two choices: walk away or face the fight head-on. What she did next? No one saw it coming. The Miami Convention Center was packed. Rows of reporters sat at the front, cameras poised and microphones ready. Behind them, veterans and activists filled the space, some standing along the walls, others murmuring amongst themselves. Pam Bondi stood at the podium, her polished demeanor unwavering. She had been in the public eye long enough to recognize when a room wasn't just restless, it was hostile. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice even, controlled. "I want to take a moment to address the concerns surrounding the latest developments in veteran healthcare reform." She didn't get to finish. A sharp voice cut through the air. "Enough of the speeches, Ms. Bondi. My brothers are dying while buried under paperwork and excuses. What are you actually going to do?" The room shifted. Every pair of eyes snapped toward the man standing near the center. He wasn't just another attendee. His faded Marine Corps hat sat low on his forehead, the embroidered logo worn from time. His face was lined with years of struggle, his jaw set like a man who had nothing left to lose. His name was Jack Holloway, a former Marine with 2 tours in Iraq. And from the way he gripped the chair in front of him, it was clear he was holding himself back from something much bigger than a question. Bondi exhaled slowly, pressing her lips together in a tight line. Security near the doors tensed. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. She had been in tough rooms before, but this was different. This wasn't a politician being questioned. This was a battlefield. Jack's voice didn't waver, but it carried the weight of a man who had spent years shouting into a void. "My best friend Luis Cortez was a Marine. He survived Iraq, only to die waiting for a surgery the VA kept delaying." The room stilled. He had a wife, a daughter, but none of that mattered when some bureaucrat lost his paperwork, twice. By the time they approved him, it was too late. Silence stretched, suffocating. Bondi's grip on the podium tightened. Jack took a step forward. "You politicians love shaking our hands during elections, love posting pictures with us in front of flags. But when we come home broken, suddenly there's budget constraints." Someone near the back clapped. Another voice murmured, "He's right." For the first time, Bondi's carefully composed mask cracked. Her eyes flickered toward her staff. They were already exchanging uneasy glances. This was getting bigger than a tense exchange. But then instead of deflecting or backing down, she did something no one expected. She stepped away from the podium. Not much, just enough to show she wasn't going to hide behind it. She met Jack's eyes. "You're right," she said, her voice lower, steady. "We do a lot of talking, but I want to hear your reality, right now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't a political dodge. She was throwing it back to him. Jack hesitated. He hadn't expected her to actually listen. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn, dog-eared notebook. It was filled with names. He held it up. "This," his voice was rough, "this is a list of veterans I know, men and women, who've been waiting for care. Some are still fighting. Some aren't here anymore." Bondi's jaw tensed. He flipped a few pages, running his finger down a column. "Ray Carter, Vietnam vet. Lost his leg in '68, got an infection in his prosthetic last year. Sat in a waiting room for 8 hours before they saw him. By then the infection had spread. They took his whole leg. He's in a nursing home now." Bondi exhaled. Jack turned another page. "Angela Hayes served 2 tours in Iraq. Honorably discharged. Her disability claim? Denied. They said her injuries weren't combat-related. She's been waiting for 4 years." He looked up, eyes sharp. "You want more?" Bondi held out her hand. "I do." The room shifted. No one expected that response. Slowly, almost cautiously, Jack handed her the notebook. The cameras caught every moment. The roughness of Jack's hands, the way Bondi's fingers tightened around the book like she understood the weight of what she just accepted. Then she flipped it open. She didn't skim. She read. She looked up. How many more? Jack narrowed his eyes. What? You said you had plenty of stories. Bondi's voice was firm. How many more? Jack hesitated, his jaw clenched. Then he pulled out his own notepad, small, battered, filled with names. This is a list of vets in my community, people fighting this system every damn day. Bondi reached for it. For a moment, Jack didn't move. He wasn't sure if he trusted her. Then slowly he handed it over. The press conference went viral within hours. Headlines exploded. Pam Bondi faces off against Marine in explosive confrontation. I want names. Bondi's unscripted moment sparks nationwide debate. Veterans across the country flooded social media with their own stories. Some were furious, echoing Jack's anger. Politicians only cared when cameras were rolling. But others felt something they hadn't in years. Hope. The pressure mounted. Bondi didn't stop at the press conference. She called the VA office, on camera, and demanded answers. What happened next? Even Jack wasn't prepared for it. Bondi pulled out her phone and, without hesitation, dialed the regional VA office in front of the entire room. Reporters immediately snapped to attention. This wasn't just a promise of action, it was action. Right here, right now. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice crackled through the speaker. Veterans Affairs Office, Tampa Regional Branch. This is Lisa speaking. How can I help you? Bondi's expression didn't waver. Lisa, this is Pam Bondi. I'm standing here with Angela Hayes, a veteran whose appeal for disability benefits has been stuck in your system for 4 years. I'd like to know why. The room held its breath. Silence on the other end. Then, a nervous shuffle. I'll need to pull up her file, Lisa stammered. I'll wait, Bondi said, her tone sharp. The crowd erupted into murmurs. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters furiously typed on their laptops. Jack folded his arms. Was she bluffing? More typing crackled through the speakerphone. Then a sharp inhale from Lisa. I have the file here, Lisa said, her voice tinged with nervous energy. It looks like Ms. Hayes' claim was initially denied due to a lack of direct combat-related injury documentation. Then, she paused. Bondi's voice tightened. Then what? Another pause. Then a quiet exhale. The case was closed due to a clerical error. A collective gasp filled the room. Angela's face twisted in confusion. Wait, what? Jack cursed under his breath. A few journalists exchanged glances, already typing frantically. Bondi narrowed her eyes. You're telling me this woman's appeal was closed due to a clerical error, and no one bothered to notify her? The voice on the other end grew even smaller. I don't know why it wasn't resubmitted. Angela let out a short, bitter laugh. So what? I've been sitting here waiting for 4 years over a mistake? Lisa stammered. I don't... Bondi cut in, her voice sharp. Who is in charge of these appeals at your office? Silence. Lisa hesitated. That would be... Director Mason. Bondi didn't miss a beat. I want his number. A long, uncomfortable pause. I don't think I can... Bondi's voice hardened. I was Attorney General of this state, Lisa. I know what you can and can't do. I'm asking for a direct contact to the person responsible for fixing this. Lisa swallowed audibly. I can have him call you. No, Bondi said without hesitation. I'll call him. The room was electric. This wasn't just another press conference anymore. This was war. Within hours, the confrontation went viral. Twitter, Facebook, and news outlets exploded with clips of the moment. Pam Bondi calls VA office live, exposes system failure in real time. Veterans' 4-year wait blamed on clerical error. What's really happening? Bondi's political gamble, real leadership or just a show? Angela's name trended nationwide. Jack's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. You don't know me, an older veteran's voice said in a voicemail, his tone rough with age. But I saw what you did today. I just wanted to say, thank you. Another message came in an hour later. My brother killed himself last year waiting on a response from the VA. Wish he'd seen this before he gave up. Jack clenched his jaw. The calls didn't stop. Neither did Bondi's. She spent the next 48 hours calling VA offices, congressional contacts, anyone with power. Her staff was overwhelmed. Then late that night, Bondi's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she answered. A low, gravelly voice came through the line. "This is Director Mason." Bondi sat up straighter. "Glad to hear from you, Director," she said smoothly. "I assume you know why I'm calling." A pause, then a sigh. "You put me in a hell of a position today." Bondi leaned back in her chair. "No," she said. "Your office did that when they let Angela Hayes's claim disappear." Another pause. Finally, Mason spoke again. "We're reopening her case, effective immediately." Bondi pressed her lips into a thin line. "And the others?" "That's complicated." "We don't have time for complicated, Director." Mason exhaled through his nose. "We have thousands of pending appeals, Ms. Bondi. I can't just push them all through overnight." Bondi didn't blink. "Then let's start with a review, a real one." Silence stretched between them. Then, Mason said something that caught her off guard. "I don't disagree with you." Bondi raised an eyebrow. "The system's a mess," Mason admitted. "But I don't run the whole damn thing. If you really want change, you need to take this fight higher." Bondi sat up straighter. "How high?" Mason's next words made her breath catch. "You want answers," he said. "You need to take this to Congress." Bondi stared out over the Tampa skyline, Mason's words still ringing in her ears. This was bigger than she thought. Taking this fight to Congress meant stepping into a battlefield even she wasn't sure she was ready for. Her phone buzzed again. A text. Richard Holloway. "Just saw the news. If you're serious about this, I'll stand with you, but you better not back out." She stared at the message. Then slowly, she typed back. "Pam Bondi. I don't back out." The next morning, Bondi held a private meeting at a local veterans center. No cameras, no reporters, just her, Jack, Angela, and a dozen veterans whose names were in that notebook. Angela sat with her arms crossed. "You really think you can get Congress to care about this?" Bondi leaned forward. "I don't know, but if we don't force the conversation, no one else will." Jack gave a short nod. "All right then," he said. "Where do we start?" Bondi exhaled. "We build momentum. Public pressure is the only thing politicians can't ignore." A scoff came from the back. An older man, probably in his 70s, shook his head. "You don't think people have tried that before?" Bondi met his gaze. "Not like this." He studied her for a long moment. Then finally he leaned back. "Fine, but if you drop the ball, you'll be just another politician who used us for a headline." Bondi didn't flinch. "Then let's make sure I don't." 1 week later, the pressure reached Congress. A Florida senator announced a formal hearing to investigate VA mismanagement. Bondi sat in her office, staring at the headline. She had wanted change. Now she had a shot at it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jack. "Richard Holloway. This is bigger than I thought. But we're in this now." She smirked slightly, shaking her head. "Pam Bondi. Yes, we are. The fight for change had just begun."